My original name is Girodondonano Gunfunfunticulus. But you might know me more by my given American name, Superman Applebee's.
And I'm Buck Abernathy. My clothes say wealthy, while my face says, don't ask how.
And we used to be political rivals, but now we're political hosts, so we can help you think the way we think you should.
Let's start with our segment, Loyalist of the Week. This week's undying loyalist is Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, so loyal, I bet at those meetings where you wear black robes in a cave, you're the one that throws non-believers into a chest full of scorpions.
Mitch McConnell, you and Loyalist of the Week. Your ideas are great, and no one thinks you sound like a drowning phonograph. Mitch McConnell, we tuck our chins into you.
That sound means it's time for the recap of the week. This week's recap, Trump's town hall, which is just like a regular town hall, except for there was no hall, and the town wants you gone.
I hope all future leaders of the world never stop complaining about a job they already have. Well, that's all the time we have. Buck, anything to plug before we go?
Yes! This week I'll be coordinating the state of Georgia's Tough Mudder voting race, which places obstacles in front of polling places. It makes voting fun and hard.
Great. And I'll be in the Florida Everglades, trying to see the world's last singing turtle. Sadly, endangered animals like this are hard to find. So I doubt I'll get to kill it.
Well, we'd like to thank the people who helped make this show possible, including our story editor, a freshman at Yale who isn't deleting nearly as many tweets as he should.
And our producer, a woman who doesn't have to explain herself. That's what the t-shirt's for.
And, as we always like to say,
You did it, America!
Hey everyone, welcome back to Electoral Dysfunction, the show where comedians and experts debate the news of the week from the safety of their quarantine. I'm Tom Brennan, coming to you from Electoral Dysfunction's World News headquarters here in beautiful Parkchester, the Bronx. Thank you for being with us for another week. And thank you to our pals at Denied from New York. That's Sean Reedy and Giancarlo Mariucco for our opening sketch. Find them on Facebook, Denied from New York. Wonderful comedy content all the time. And we are now, as of when this podcast drops, we will be 10 days away from Election Day, but already people are voting in record numbers across the country. If you can vote early, vote early. If you got to wait until Election Day, it's only 10 more days, or less if you choose to listen to this on Monday, in which case it'll be 9 more days, and so forth. That's how math works. So 10 days to go. Anything can happen. Please vote for Joe Biden. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not biased. But in the meantime, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Ned Thorne, star White Me to the panel. And join me in welcoming this week's panel. Very excited to have all these folks with us. First up, very talented writer, comedian. Catch her new podcast, Daughters of DC, wherever you get your podcast. Sasha Stewart is here with us. Hey, Sasha, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much.
Thank you for being here. Welcome. Please welcome back to the show, lawyer, writer, hero, Madiba Dennie. Hey, Madiba, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. Happy with the hero. That's a good addition.
Well, now you must live up to it.
Oh.
that is the goal and curse of all heroes. And speaking of cursed heroes, columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, please welcome back as always. Hey, there's Mike over your shoulder yet again. Robert George.
Hey, Tom, Sasha, Madiba, great to see all of you guys once again.
All right, so here we are. When we are recording this, there are 10 days left until the presidential election, though voting has already started across the country. We are currently seeing, as of Thursday's numbers, a 126% increase over 2016 in terms of early voting. Some staggering numbers, particularly out of the major swing states, and particularly for young voters out of major swing states. That happens against the backdrop of a global pandemic that is still raging across the country. And at this point, 8.54 million Americans who have been infected, over 224,000 who are dead. And the President of the United States, who is still, as of this recording, Donald John Trump, had his final debate of the cycle against Vice President Joe Biden, which happened just this week on Thursday. I am still, days later, shocked that it even happened. That's my thing. Like, I thought for sure this debate was not going to occur at all, and yet somehow, some way, they all got on stage and it happened.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I'm sorry, you guys. I never realized his middle name was John.
Yep.
He's always goes by Donald J. Trump. I just figured his middle name was Jay.
Yep. I always figured his middle name was Hussein. So it depends on where you are.
Well, he was hitting Florida a couple of times this past week, and he was definitely stressing when he was speaking in outside of the villages, which is in a state that is known as God's waiting room. The villages is the waiting room of God's waiting room. It is this
Hell's waiting room, I like to say.
It's a senior facility, or no, I guess not facility, but a senior living neighborhood residential area, and it has historically been heavily Republican. But there have been a couple of big Biden rallies. There was I guess about a week or maybe 2 weeks ago, there was a Biden driving rally where they drove to drop off their absentee ballots and so forth. And
that driving rally was in fact a go-kart rally, little golf cart. So they all had their
golf
golf carts
stuff,
on their way to the polls. So
and the great thing about that was, the left turn signals were not flickering because they were golf carts. So that made it so much. But the point was, the president was outside of the villages, which you're kind of surprised, even though it is Florida, you're still kind of surprised that the president is, defending what should be his home turf, particularly since he officially moved to Florida about a year ago. But he was hammering, Barack Hussein Obama, Barack Hussein Obama. It could have been because the former president did kind of leave a rather blistering speech this week, where it looked like the energy and the passion and the bile of 4 years had just been building, and Obama just
In Obama's defense, that speech was delivered in Philly, right by one of the Philly sports stadiums, and you can't be nice by a Philly sports stadium and expect to get out of that city alive. Like, once you hit South Philly, everyone becomes an angry drunk man, no matter how sober and what they are. Like, once you're by one, just try it. Try it. Take that, South Philly. Lovely part of the world where I've always been welcome.
By the way, Tom, one thing I did want to take note of, and I know we're gonna dive into the whole early voting and the state of the race a little bit later on. But I did like the fact that here we are, 9 or 10 days out from Election Day, and I've suddenly realized that the early voters have finally made manifest this unusual phrase that has been part of the sports lexicon for decades, right? You said it right now. Early voting is up 126%. How many times have we heard athletes say, I'm going to give 110%? And we thought, you can't give more than 100. Yes, you can if it's about voting.
Right.
It's 100. We're giving 126% of our early voting passion. Go.
We really put those math nerds in their place, finally.
Damn straight.
Let's talk about
statistics.
Yeah, eat it, stats. But also do us a solid on election night, stats.
Swear to God.
Don't screw us.
I mean, everything is data driven in sports now, and it's data driven in politics, and so here we are. Darn it.
I mean,
Please,
regarding election night and election day, I think one of the things that we need to do up front is just establish that that is a misnomer and that is like a thing of the past. Like, it is election month. We do not want people trying to call the election on election night. Like, perhaps maybe if there's like an overwhelming landslide, but like, yeah, like, come on, guys. But
Honestly, even if it's a landslide the opposite way, I'll be heartbroken, but I'll also be like, but at least it's over.
right.
If it's a landslide the opposite way, I don't think that means
That's
that
true.
it was a
I mean,
reincarnation.
At least
Good
it is
point.
over with it being the ceremonial name for living.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
Democracy.
Yeah.
If it's a
Look,
landslide the other way,
A landslide, a landslide the opposite way means, oh, well, the Russians did manage to hack all the electoral systems and switched all the votes. So, hey,
Yeah.
okay, this will tell us something. So,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Hello.
but Tom, you wanted us to,
Yes.
the question you actually,
Who
just
cares? I've seen
what
it
we just,
majority of
what
this
we
show
just
at this
did
point.
right here, what we just did right here is that we learned the debate rules, because Tom asked a question which was clearly, supposed to lean in towards the direction
Yeah.
of talking about the last debate, and of course we all decided to go in our own direction, which is
Right.
basically what we have been taught to do on debates. So see how I segued back to your original question, like right there, Tom.
Well, yeah, I guess you might win this episode of Electoral Dysfunction, which good for you. The points matter. Yeah, I'm no Kristen Welker, so what can I say? I'm not good at moderating. But what do we think? We did do a show right after the debate, but it's still fresh in our mind and sort of has dictated the news for the weekend. And I think it's worth revisiting that debate and at least revisiting what we felt about it and what we feel about it, like in terms of the context of the race. And Sasha, I'm curious your thoughts off that debate now with it in the past.
It's,
Now
it's just nice to hear Biden get to talk. Like, I don't really, we don't hear him on TV very often. We don't hear Trump, and it's just nice. It's so soothing. Hear just a kindly old man say that he cares about me and like my feelings and like what I've been through and like that I stay alive. I don't know. I just appreciate it. I'm like, this is what this could be. And I know that like the, CNNs and Fox and MSNBC are freaking out because they're like, oh God, this will tank our ratings. But I'm like, please, let's just tank your ratings for a few years. There's other news to cover besides a crazy president.
Oh God, Sasha, really? I mean, COVID, really? Why is everybody so like up in their, the COVIDness? I mean,
We're all up in our feelings about COVID.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, Robert, to your profession and your chosen world, media, with all due respect towards it, maybe we could also, if we get a new stimulus package under a Biden administration, work in something to offset the ratings loss that you guys will all see because of Trump.
That's actually not a bad. That's not actually a bad idea. Because we are going to see knock wood, we'll see a significant ratings drop when the Trump show, if it happens, if the Trump show ends up being pushed off the stage. But in fairness, there's even if Biden wins, there's a good 2.5 months for President Trump to destroy the country. So it's not
a lot of damage in that time.
It's not as if that. It's not as, and those end of the world TV shows. I mean, The Walking Dead has done really gangbuster ratings on AMC for the last several years. So end of the world dramas can be big buffo office, can be buffo big office buffo, whatever the phrase is.
We'll fact check you on that.
Donald Trump screwed up the word buffo this week, and I did the same thing.
Sorry, go ahead, Sasha.
We have a pandemic, we have climate change, and we have fires raging everywhere. So
and racial unrest. Don't forget the racial unrest.
Plenty of world ending. It's not even going to be copper wire left in the walls of the White House if Trump loses by the time Biden shows up. Madiba, your thoughts off the debate and the state of the race right now?
Yeah, so I think my first thought, as people were talking about, like who won, did Biden win, did Trump win? First of all, I think I personally won in that I no longer have to hear any more Trump debates. Like, this is a huge win for me, I think. Second, in terms of who won, I think it just depends on what your definition of winning is. Because like for me personally, like if you're judging winning based off who's spoke in coherent and accurate sentences, then Biden was the clear winner. But that's not everyone's metric. I've come to understand over the past couple of years. Some people are totally fine with incoherent and inaccurate statements. I also found that the bar was on the floor, the ocean floor, to be more precise, when, like, even as the debate was starting, when they had like the pre-debate, talking heads room, someone was like, oh, like, do we think we'll see like a more disciplined Trump tonight? What should we expect from him? Like, is it going to be like sufficiently presidential this time? And it's like, how many times must we go through this? Like, must we be Lucy and Charlie Brown with the football every single time? Like, this is so nonsensical to me. So I think those were my biggest takeaways, that, like, I don't know whose minds this is going to change. I don't know what people really expect from this. But we did it, and it's over. So that's good.
Yeah. God willing, this is the last time Donald Trump is in a presidential debate, because who knows? Like,
Yes.
Who knows what could happen in the next 4 years? He may run again if he loses. He may steal a third term. These are the nightmares that keep me up awake at night.
Really,
I think
the thing about a Trump third term would be the debates.
Yeah, that would be the worst part of it. Particularly when that third debate, like Van Jones or someone is like, I think he was really presidential tonight, and be like, and I'll be like, what? It's 12 years later. We know. Forget it. I think a thing that stood out to me from this debate that, people have talked at length about how there was more of a discussion on policy. And we talked about this a little bit after the debate as well. And I found that enjoyable. Two policy things that came up that I think people are still talking about. And I'm curious what the panel's thoughts on. The first thing was when the conversation about climate change, which is, I think, the first time that we talked about climate change in any of the general election debates at this point. But the new line is that Biden talked about transitioning from an oil and gas economy. And the question has been, was that a gaffe or was it not? I was interested by that because I think even that language of transitioning is a very business world wording. It's the kind of word that doesn't frighten, like, it's the kind of word that oil and gas companies talk about when they talk about transitioning to, like, different ways of getting oil and gas. It seemed very, like, there was this, suddenly you're seeing, like, I think John Cornyn in Texas being like, he's going to transition us out of business. But it seemed to me like that was, as, like, if that was the worst gaffe, I was like, all right, great, things worked out well. Although there's also part of me, the climate warrior, and part of me was like, what does that mean? Are you going to do more than anything? I don't know. But I was curious thoughts on that conversation about climate change. I was surprised that it got, it was the end of the debate, so one could argue that that's when people start to tune out. One could argue people start to tune back in. I was surprised that climate change got as much attention, given how little our media seems to care about it. No offense, Robert. Thoughts on that climate exchange, I guess.
Well, the no.
We're good. We'll move on.
Robert, go
Let's move on. Let's get back. It's I thought you were going in a slightly different direction.
Sure.
But,
hey.
Climate change.
Yeah.
Say again, Sasha.
I was just saying, I like climate change. I like this direction.
It's interesting. It's actually kind of interesting because this was kind of the one area. This is kind of one area where post debate, people were thinking that Biden had kind of stepped into it because of, he said, okay, we're transitioning away from oil. And when you look at campaigns, if ever there's a campaign that puts out things right after the debate that says, well, what candidate X was actually saying was da 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 da. And there was some of that, and I don't know. It might end up. I don't know. It might end up costing him, say, Texas, where there've been some polls showing him kind of going back and forth. Trump ahead by a couple of points, Biden up by a point, then tied. But In the big picture, this, and as Tom kind of hinted to this, this really was the first presidential debate where you've actually got a real conversation going on about climate change, about climate, about energy, and that's good. Biden is not going to adopt the Green New Deal or the new Green Deal, the Green New Deal in the way that some progressives want. But as he himself has said, he sees himself, 78 years old, as a transitional president, as a transitional Democrat. If he wins, he will now have a platform to start this conversation about how we deal with what is going to be ultimately an existential threat to the entire world. He will have that platform. He'll go back into the Paris climate, the Paris Climate Accords, and America will, even if it's only moving, from here to say maybe here in terms of dealing with climate change, that's still kind of significant. And once that conversation starts, you can't really back away from it.
I don't think saying the truth is a gaffe.
Well,
no, it's very popular.
No, actually, in politics, in fact, going back, and I'm sorry if I'm going to be putting on my old age, my old guy hat on here. There was a political author and editor, writer, Michael Kinsley, who was an editor of the New Republic a couple of decades ago, and there was a phrase called the Kinsley gaffe, meaning, but by his definition, a gaffe is when a politician accidentally tells the truth about what they really feel, and it can sometimes, and there's a hint of it having potentially dire consequences politically. Like if a Republican says something like, well, yes, we really should kind of raise taxes to deal with the Social Security gap. Oops, it's true, but it may cause him, that politician, headaches with his base or with a larger part of the electorate. So in a sense, that is almost the definition of a gap.
I guess I meant that it's like in his plan.
Yeah.
It's something he's been talking a lot about, is transitioning. And like Tom was saying, it is a business word. And my dad is actually a Texas businessman who will be voting Biden, which is the first time he's voted in a Democratic presidential election and probably since I was alive.
Did he vote for Trump last time?
No, he did not vote last time.
Oh, he did not vote last time. Okay.
He was like, Trump is Aaron Burr. And he was like, he has no beliefs.
Yeah.
He has no values. He said, but I can't quite do Hillary. But then he voted.
Given the opportunity,
Yeah.
Trump would have raised an army to try and take over the country,
Yes.
and then eventually have to flee to Staten Island. He'll probably die on Staten Island from syphilis.
Yep,
I can see the parallels already. I'm sorry, Sasha.
No, you were totally accurate.
Has your dad ever gone to New Jersey by any chance?
Right? I got to be really careful about that. He did come to New York recently, so we really we missed that one. No, so I think Biden understands that, like, the idea of transitioning from oil to gas, off of oil and gas, is actually very popular among the broad electorate. It's not popular with Republican politicians. That's true. It certainly is not. But amongst like actual human beings, even in states like Pennsylvania and Texas, it actually is pretty popular. The idea that, like, yeah, sometime we are going to need to. My dad loves talking about like carbon capture and like, hey, there are all these ways that you can actually like, capture carbon. I'm like, I don't know if that's real, Dad, but I'm happy that you're excited about this and that you are pumped to join the climate conversation. So I think it's
exactly. Very good. As that climate conversation has become a more mainstream thing, like I said, this is the kind of language you're seeing out of oil and gas companies, which recognize that, like, they certainly don't want to live in a world where they're completely gone, but they recognize that if the system's changing, business people aren't dumb. Like, they I mean, they're dumb about a lot of things, but if they see that the world is trying to push in this direction, then they see there's a profit to be made in that direction. And they start looking like, again, that's what really stood out to me. Everyone's like, it was the way he said it is what you could see the CEO of like Shell saying someday and being like, it's time to get away from oil and gas. We're like, finally, Shell did it. Hooray.
Right. My brother actually would go, he went to the Paris Climate Accords because he works for a nonprofit called Corporate Accountability International. You can guess what they do. Mm-hmm. They don't like corporations. Yeah. And so he was the one like going there and trying to get the oil and gas companies out of those talks, because that's exactly the kind of language they say. Like, you know, Biden's really just mimicking where sort of the business world is at right now. I would love him to be a lot further to the left, but yeah. I'm happy that at least like he's not saying like, oh no, I'm just gonna like, there's your line. Is if he was saying like, yeah, we can just have oil and gas forever. It's great.
Yeah, I wanna second what Sasha said. I think that's absolutely right in terms of it was a gaffe if you are already like a diehard Republican. Like Trump was saying, you know, like, oh, that's a big statement. And I was sort of caught off guard by it because I was like, is it? Like, that's what folks are saying right now. That's what the big companies are saying. That's what Biden has been saying. And I'm like, you know, getting away from oil is good. Like our planet is in free fall. I don't understand why you're saying like, that's a big statement. And similarly, you know, I would like it to be a bigger statement. Like I would like, you know, more about the Green New Deal. But I was amused by the concept that this would be a gaffe that would alienate a bunch of the electorate or something. Because I just am not convinced that that's the case.
I also love the idea that it's like, oh no, he's like threatening jobs when he's the only person on stage who actually wants to get Americans employed again.
Yeah, but I think the other part of it also there, exactly as you said, there's that weird, like, it's, to your point, Madiba, it's the sort of thing, like, it gives permission to the people who were probably going to vote for Trump anyway, but might not be saying they're going to vote for Trump to say, that's it, I'm voting for Trump. I have a hard time seeing someone who was like, oh, 224,000 dead. Even if I agree with him on taxes, I'm exhausted of this chaos and everything. And transitioning gas oil economy to the future, that's it. Nope, too far. Like, change my mind. I'm off the fence, back for Trump. I also think a thing that I found very, very interesting about that moment, exactly as you said, like Madiba, just Trump had this like super animated, like, that's a big statement. And it made me realize, like, Donald Trump has absolutely no idea what his opponent's plans are. He hasn't sat in any of the briefing books. I mean, like, certainly smart to seize on it if you think it can help you politically. But it was also the first time he'd ever heard that. That was the thing. Maybe first thing, Robert.
Okay.
Please, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think this sort of similarly goes to like who your audience is, because when I was watching the debate, when he being Trump here started talking about Hunter Biden's laptop, I had no idea what he was speaking about. I was confused, like looking around, just like, what is this laptop? Like, I don't know what's happening. Like, and I was like, can someone tell me? Actually, no, I take it back. Don't tell me. I'm not convinced. I actually want to know. And so I was thinking, like, you know, like in the same way that I would have only been capable of understanding that if I had been like mainlining Fox News. That's sort of a similar audience that Trump was speaking to when he said, like, that's a big statement. Like, it's only a big statement if this is like already your wheelhouse.
Yeah. And I think that's perfect. Thank you. Perfect segue to the other thing from the debate that stood out to me. And we talked about this a little bit after the show, and I think it warrants more conversation. Just the conversation that Biden and Trump had about race, and specifically about the crime bill, which, Robert, you tweeted about this, and I think you're absolutely right, was that Trump had some strong hits against Biden. They would have been stronger if Trump were not, you know, the incumbent. Like if he were a challenger, I think it would have been harder hits, but harder hits on him about the crime bill that you argued was sort of targeted towards either discouraging Black turnout or helping to goose some of his stronger numbers with Black men. And I think that's right. And I think going back to your point about that, Madiba, about him playing for his audience, it was such a strong moment for Trump for a while. And then suddenly he started doing his Trump stuff that completely underrated. Like that thing we talked about that in our show right after the debate, and is sort of proven true, is that the conversation could have been about Biden's struggles defending the crime bill, and instead the conversation that people talked about in that segment was that he compared himself to Abraham Lincoln.
Well, part of Trump's problem was he's got a defensible record in terms of the economy and job creation among the minority community. And he can also point to the funding for the HBCUs, which is actually a little bit more complicated and has to do with the Republican Senate pushing back against Obama when they were trying to fund them a few years ago. But all that said, Trump does have a defensible argument there, and one of the underreported stories of the last few years has been the drop off of Black male support for the Democratic candidate. It peaked in 2008. Obama got slightly less Black male support in his second time around in 2012, and it dropped seriously under Hillary Clinton. And so the Republicans have seen that as a possible opening. And also, by the way, parallel with that is Hispanic male support has also increased. Hispanic male support for Trump has also increased over the last few years. So one of the reasons why Biden is actually doing well is he has been able to pull back some of the white support towards the Democrats. Yes, definitely suburban women, but also on the margins, some rural white supporters who have been Trump people and may very well have voted for Obama in 2012. They've come back to the Democratic ticket as well. The trade-off has been
white seniors also playing,
and definitely white seniors.
Because it turns out if you let old people die, they don't like it.
But even as friend of the show, Evan Siegfried has written, the drop off of seniors from the Republican Party actually started in 2008. Has started in 2018 in the midterms, and of course has accelerated in 2020. But there is definitely, in the same way that Trump's strongest support is white men. Now, in the big picture, 92% of Black folks are going to be voting for Joe Biden. But there's maybe 15 to 20% of Black men might vote for Trump. Similarly, there's a significant amount of support among Latino men for Trump, and part of that is that image that he's always had, that braggadocio, it's, let me put it this way, it's not a surprise that among, say, the entertainment community, those that would be considered Trump curious are hip hoppers, are Kanye, are Ice Cube, are 50.
Sorry, hip hoppers.
Hip hoppers. Robert can say it. I can't. Imagine if I said it; it'd be way lamer. So I'll allow it, Robert.
Yeah. So some of it has to do, some of it has to do with that image that he has put himself out there as this successful, entrepreneur who puts his name up in big lights and all this other kind of stuff. That there's part of the macho psyche that resonates with certain folks, with certain men in minority communities, and so Trump realizes that, and that's part of what he was putting out there now, and trying to make Biden own own the crime bill from the 1990s, which the actual politics behind that is so complicated that the Biden doesn't even try to defend it. He just says, I made a mistake. We shouldn't have done that, and we're going in a different direction. But those two things combined, Trump does have a message out there, but then he blurs it with his whole stuff about the greatest president for blacks since Abraham Lincoln, which you don't have to go that far to get to LBJ, Harry Truman, and hell, maybe even Richard Nixon.
We'll get back to that in a second. Madiba, I think you had a point.
Yeah, there are a couple points I wanted to raise. I would be very surprised if he gets 20% of Black men to vote for him. I have a little bit more faith in Black men than that. And I think we do have to, you mentioned this, Robert, I think we do have to remember that even when we're talking about him getting some Black men to peel off and appeal to some Black men, it's still a fraction, because overwhelmingly Black people recognize that Trump is a racist and is not here to support Black people. Yeah, I'm we all know this.
I'm the Black Republican on the panel, and I'm co-signing what you just said there. I mean, it's kind of obvious for me. It's kind of obvious for me, but it is why there is that. When you start slicing the electorate down that much, that's why you do get. But that by the way, it does kind of show how pathetic the Republican message has been to the black folks going back decades, and that Trump and them they see as a glimmer the fact that they might get 20% of the Black male vote, not even the Black vote, just the Black male vote.
Right. I think it's much more likely, if he's going to impact the Black vote in any way, I think it's much more likely that he succeeds in depressing turnout than he actually does in getting Black voters. And read the in Black entertainment community. Yeah, I think there has been a few Black celebrities that have come out either for Trump affirmatively or Trump curious. You have Kanye, you have 50 Cent, you have Ice Cube. But I think there are two things here. One, that the driving factor is not so much race as it is wealth, is these people wanting to retain their money. 50 was outright complaining, just being 65% marginal tax rate. I don't know if he knew it was marginal, but he was just 65%.
I would love that in one of his songs.
I'm fine with Trump hating Black people because I want to keep my money. So I want to say first off, I think it's this is one of very few times you'll ever hear me say it's class, not race. These words do not really leave my mouth, but I think that's one instance of it. And
by the way, I think of those folks there, we would talk about those three rappers in particular.
Hip hoppers, Robert. They're called hip hoppers.
50 Cent, apropos his name, made sure it's definitely about the money. I mean, he does not want to be 20 cent. He does not want to be 20 cent, right? You have to be 20 cent. But and then Kanye of course Kanye's got his own kind of weird.
Kanye's Kanye.
Yeah. We're watching him have a early midlife crisis.
Yeah, when he sometimes makes sense, he starts drilling down, making it almost a social conservative argument, because he starts getting into abortion and stuff like that. The one that's really interesting is Ice Cube, because he was. He got lumped in, and this by the way, let me revert back to my Black Republican roots. This is what sometimes really irritates me about the left. If any Black person, whether an entertainer or some other kind of celebrity, makes a critique about Black politics that does not necessarily go completely line up with what the Democratic platform is, they immediately start getting shamed and called sellout and things like that. Ice Cube has had this thing called the Black Contract with America, which I think is actually kind of funny in the sense that he cribbed the line from Newt Gingrich and the Republicans from the 90s, but it's an actual kind of platform that starts talking about building Black wealth and entrepreneurship and things like that, and he said that he was open to having a conversation with Trump in terms of how what Trump and Republicans have been talking about on the economic side, how these things could possibly come together. It was not an endorsement of Trump per se, but it was saying, there's something here that could be talked about. But because we're in this, the heat of the campaign, everybody wanted to just start piling on Ice Cube, which I thought was just going a little bit too far.
So
sorry. Nope, I'm sorry.
You need that.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts here. I'm just trying to get them straight in my head for a second. I do agree and recognize that the Black community, while we largely vote as a political monolith, we are not a political monolith. Now, there's like a range of opinions. There are some folks who would have like more socially or fiscally conservative opinions. I'm not one of them, but there are those people who exist. But the reason why we do almost uniformly vote Democrat is because Republican platform is largely to create a white ethno-state. So like even where we have I'm just saying, tell me if I'm wrong. So like even if we have these variations within like political ideology, we still sort of like vote for like self-preservation by and large. And I guess sort of just getting back to like the hip hop thing though, something I do think is interesting is how you mentioned is like a couple of like high profile entertainers, and Trump was sort of a model. If you look back in like the lyrics in like the 80s and 90s, like it was just sort of like, this is the symbol for making it, like this is
he was probably name checked in more in more hip hop songs than just about any non other rapper.
Right. I would say a possible rival would actually be Monica Lewinsky. She appears in a lot of lyrics, but
for different reasons, obviously.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that there is this sort of complicated relationship between old school hip hop and Donald Trump, and that he was this like the gold standard for making it. But I just, I want to, and I do have faith in Black men that like the idea of making it and the idea of like masculinity is not so limited and so toxic that there's this going to be allegiance to Donald Trump. And I believe our like self-preservation instinct is stronger, and I believe just like our humanity is stronger than that.
Well, it's sort of like the bizarro, him appealing to Black voters is sort of like the bizarro campaign as to how Biden is looking to win Pennsylvania, which is not to say like he's not going to, by any stretch of the imagination, win huge rural white voters numbers in Pennsylvania. But if he can cut into it enough and combine it with the Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and the suburban areas around there, he wins Pennsylvania. Likewise, I think, Robert, your point, it seems less of a like, will there be a significant Black male vote for Trump? No, but could there be enough votes that it offsets some of that? Maybe.
And remember, that's kind of what happened in 2016. Less so in Pennsylvania, but there was significant drop in Black turnout in Milwaukee, which impacted Wisconsin, and similar in Detroit, which impacted what happened in Michigan. So yeah, if he can either if Trump can either get get one or two Black male votes coming to him, or those saying, well, look, hey, I got a job in the last few years, and Biden's got all this this crime bill stuff, so to heck with both of them. I'm staying home. That's still a win. If you're a Republican, that's still a win somebody who is not going to the polls that's going to be actively voting against you, and is also you're stealing a vote from your opponent at the same time.
That was actually going to be my question to Madiba. Is like, how do you feel about the effectiveness? Like, we know that Trump was very effective in depressing Black turnout in 2016. There have been a whole bunch of articles about it recently, that it was a targeted campaign, that literally there was like columns in
there's a British documentary.
I know, it's a British doc. Yeah. Those British journalists got it right. You know, just being like, depress, like get them out, like do not let them vote. And I was wondering, do you think it's still effective in 2020, or do you think that the Black turnout will increase from 2016? I mean,
yeah,
I'm not saying 2008 levels. Right.
My suspicion is that it can increase, but so I have a concern still about voter suppression. I feel like voter suppression that's like the bigger concern than like whether Black folks like want to vote. It's whether we can vote, since like the Republican, not just Republicans, Democrats are like not super awesome on voter suppression either. It's just Republicans are like way more aggressive about it. Like it's like actually the strategic game plan, like the fewer people that vote, the better for us. So I think like that would be my bigger concern than like interest in turning out. And I do think that there is like a segment of people who are like not interested in voting for either Biden or Trump, like younger Black folk in particular, who are just like, you're giving me a choice between like two terrible old white guys, like I'm going to like, I refuse to make this choice. But I think there are more people than that who are like, I want to create the best conditions under which I can fight. I want to like minimize harm, and the only way that I can do that electorally is by voting for Biden. And like, yeah, like this will create the like better universe for me to agitate under. And so I think that more Black people are going to do that. And I think there's also, like you mentioned, there's been like a slew of articles about this recently. And at least I feel this way. I obviously do not speak for all Black folks, but I just feel like if I were reading,
you don't.
I know, shocking. I feel like if I'm reading something that was like, oh, like I am trying to make sure that Black people don't vote, I'll be like, I'm getting my Black ass to the polls then. Like, like suck on that.
Yeah. Oh my God. I've been volunteering with the Georgia Voter Protection Hotline, and it is like, people want to vote. And do not get me wrong, like Brian Kemp is really trying his best to make sure especially Black people can't vote, but people are doing everything they can to make sure they vote. And it's been really inspiring being like, listening to people like jump through 800 hoops and maybe like, why do you have to jump through any hoops? There should be no hoops. It's voting. It should be the easiest, simplest thing ever. But also just being like really proud of our country for doing whatever it takes, despite the fact that there should not be any barriers.
Yeah, I strongly agree. Like the amount of barriers and burdens there are to voting is like shameful, and this should not be the case in a democratic society. And you know, should Biden win, there will be a really good opportunity to like actually make some democracy reforms. Like there's this bill like HR 1 that is like jam-packed full of democracy reforms that would do things like hopefully, you know, like make accessing the ballot easier. But yeah, as we talk about like overcoming those barriers, I don't really believe in vote shaming in that like, and just that I don't think it's like necessarily effective. Like if you're trying to get people to go vote.
Yeah. A lot of shaming really isn't effective overall.
In general, shame, shame. I reserve it for people I never want to hear from again. So right. Trump family looking at you in 2 weeks.
Yeah. So like, and I know some people say this in like a shaming way sometimes, but like this is generally just like what I thought and applied it to myself. And I thought this like well before John Lewis died. And I guess it's even like more significant for me now. But I had often thought John Lewis didn't get beat on a bridge for me to not vote. Like people like fought and died for this, and I'm not gonna not vote, recognizing the struggles that people went through for me to be able to vote. And And I don't, like, I don't say that to like shame anyone, like you should feel guilty for not doing it. But that's just how I personally feel.
That's a wonderful point, and wonderfully said. I do want to move on, but there's 2 points that I was thinking while everyone's talking that I want to hit here. First of all, I would say Democrats are great on fighting voter suppression so long as they don't control the state where the suppression happens. I'm going to say this right now, it might get me in trouble, but I stand by this. Early voting, we're recording this on Saturday, started in New York City, and it is really encouraging, and I was so moved to go to my polling place and have to leave because I had to come back to record this show because it was a 2-hour wait around the block. And the other question, why in one of the bluest states of the country is there only one voting site in my neighborhood if there's going to be this much demand? And one other thing I just want to note that I think going back to Biden and the crime bill, something he's done, Robert, you made a point, the politics behind it are very complicated. And in fact, Joy Reid this week after the debate really did a great job laying out some important things that are overlooked in this, was about how the genesis of the 94 crime bill in part was with Black pastors and Black communities pushing for a lot of change and more investment in safety that kind of got spiraled because a Republican and conservative leaning country and conservative leading Democrats, had their own agenda. I think Biden is smart, to just handle it by saying we made a mistake and move on. I think, when you had a career that long, you shouldn't say that on everything, but I imagine there is some resonance. And I've seen there's been a lot of resonance, it seems, in response to him saying it was a mistake. People are like, oh, how interesting, particularly juxtaposed with Trump, who will never admit a mistake.
And Biden wrote most of the bill because he was the head of the Judiciary Committee at the time. But this was a bill that was fully supported and pushed by President Bill Clinton at the time. And the thing that could be, I don't know whether Joy Reid got into this, but the reach of the crime bill from '94 to now has been incredibly vast, politically speaking. I was working on Capitol Hill when the crime bill was being discussed. I was working for a Republican member of Congress. In the summer of '94, the bill gets to the House. The bill gets to the House floor. Now, the House is always different from the Senate in that usually the House it's majority rules. You bring it to the floor and it's usually gonna pass. But there is one area where there's a procedural vote, what they call the rule, which basically says, all right, the bill's about to come up, and this is how the debate is going to be handled, and this is usually a party line vote. The rule failed the first time the crime bill got there because Republicans, not surprisingly, voted against it. Voted against it because they felt it wasn't there weren't enough punitive measures in there, and there was too much community investment as some of the Black pastors were calling for. Meanwhile, you had 38 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. 10 of them voted against it because they thought it was too punitive, and there wasn't enough investment in there. The combination of the CBC members voting no, plus the Republican members voting no, and then there were a couple of conservative Democrats who also voted no. The bill went down, and that the failure of a bill that was pushed by the president and pushed by the Democratic leadership was a big signal that the 40-year hold that Democrats had on the House was getting really shaky. It was a blow up. The White House, desperately raced over to talk to the House leadership and said, you've got to get this back on here because we are looking at, to use a phrase, a tsunami coming in the fall, and yes, even the House majority might be in danger, which, as it turned out, it was. Now they ended up getting the bill pushed through after 3 or 4 members of the CBC who had voted against it the first time. They came back, but that right there was a signal that things were going to be going bad for the Democrats come 1994, and indeed that was when that was the Republican Revolution, which of course then echoed years later with the Tea Party and then with Trump. So it's very, very funny now though to see Republicans saying, well, Joe Biden, he passed that awful crime bill that led to mass incarceration, which thankfully our criminal justice reform is turning the clock on. I'm thinking, wait a minute, I was there. I remember what was going on.
Robert helped do that.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Robert George, architect of the '94 crime bill.
My bad.
There's 2 more.
I'm sorry, I was a prisoner of the moment.
Nicely done. I want to. Well done. That look on Madiba's face. Never has someone summed up my relationship with Robert George so well. I think what I think there's 2 other things I want to talk about. I don't know. I've decided I don't know how much time we should waste on Hunter Biden and America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani, except to simply say
Tom, stop trying to make Hunter Biden happen.
You stole my line. Well done. Except to simply say, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I love so much that Rudy Giuliani's last act in American politics is as the George Costanza of the Trump administration, like just getting goofed by people at all turns, like constantly showing up. I'm just imagining him like bursting into the Oval Office, like, Donald, I got it, oh, like running in his underpants, falling around. It's delightful. As someone who remembers very well living through the Giuliani days and just thinking to himself, ugh, everyone likes this guy and I hate him. I just want to go back in time and like grab young high school Tom Brennan and be like, don't worry, they'll know, and disappear.
He's got it coming.
Yep, he's got it. Imagine being in a situation where you're taken, where your opponent, and I mean no disrespect to the Biden family, but you've got a senator, a 47-year senator turned vice president's son named Hunter, who gets into all this mischief and trouble, and somehow you end up being the one who looks dumber. You must be really bad at your oppo game in that situation.
Well, what's so ridiculous about this is, there might be an actual Hunter Biden and, I don't know, pay for play and getting your dad to sign off on something. There might have actually been kind of a story there, but the way that Rudy Giuliani and Trump and Team Trump tried to make this a story, almost as an echo of 2016, where the FBI discovers, has confiscated Anthony Weiner's laptop and finds these emails that may be connected to Hillary Clinton, and announces this 10 days before Election Day, and either causes Democrats to stay home or energizes people to switch their votes in 3 states. The idea that they try to almost run the same play, but the big difference is 2016 was this black swan event where James Comey was seen as a neutral guy, and people said, "Oh, the FBI is saying what."
Remember those days when James Comey was a neutral figure?
Well, and he's still kind of a neutral figure now because, different parts of the spectrum hate him equally for different reasons.
He's at absolute zero.
Yeah, no, but the point was, it's the FBI weighs in and it says, oh wow, this is so that we should kind of pay attention to this. It's different when Rudy Giuliani is shopping. Is shopping this story around to various media outlets. The New York Post ends up biting on it, and then you suddenly see all the folks on the conservative media stream screaming and yelling that that CNN and the New York Times and the Washington Post aren't all jumping on this, particularly when we've got warning signals from the FBI and others in the intelligence agency. This sounds like Republican Russian intelligence feeding information same difference, yeah. Feeding information to Rudy Giuliani, who, by the way, had been hanging out with a guy that Trump's own Treasury Department identified as a Russian as a Russian intelligence officer. So it's amazing that and by the way, that Trump is screaming and yelling that a media that he's been calling fake news for the last 4 years is not reporting what seems to be fake news is, as I say, the chef's kiss.
Other thoughts on Rudy, Hunter, all that, and
I just really appreciated that before this show, I got to do research by watching the Borat film.
Mm-hmm.
That was absolutely delightful. Made my Friday. And
was it a cut?
It's delightful. It's a great movie. I had a wonderful time watching it, and the ending with Rudy was just so gross.
Sasha, was it a happy ending with Rudy?
Yikes. No. It's not for anyone. Even when it is, it's not. Madiba, thoughts on the downfall of America's mayor?
Okay, two thoughts. One is that I think in addition to this nonsense coming from Rudy Giuliani, as opposed to like an actual respected government official with some appearance of neutrality, is also that, when it was against like Hillary Clinton and her family, Hillary had been the subject of like decades worth of smear campaigns and was also born with the wrong set of equipment in her pants. And so I think that this made people, like a certain section of the electorate, like very receptive to additional smears. And I feel like that's just not going to work against Joe Biden. Like they're going to find that some of the same tricks that they employed before, and because they want to use the same tricks again, just aren't going to work this time because they're running against like a fellow old white dude. So it just doesn't work.
You're absolutely right. I've always said this, like I think there's many valid criticisms of Hillary Clinton. Most of them are valid criticisms of anyone, particularly when she was a senator, of any senator. Right. And exactly so, like I think 4 years ago, when it's a woman doing suspicious stuff, it's, ooh, what's going on? 4 years later, I think the general response is like, so, and again, like I said this before the show, it's like, he only has one kid trying to exploit him for, great. Sounds like I would kill for only one. Sounds good. Let's do this.
This is also like after we've had, years of Trump scandals. So people are going to look at any scandal a little bit differently. Yeah. And my second thought, read the Giuliani shenanigans is, wow, like old white dudes putting their hands down their pants are having a moment. Like, it's too much, man.
Yeah, you guys. I didn't mention this in my, like, hey, let's plug Sasha, but my McSweeney's piece that I co-wrote with some friends of mine, 10 legitimate reasons to pull out your dick on Zoom, is currently number 4 trending on McSweeney's right now.
And with that, I think we will call it a week for electoral dysfunction. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. Sasha Stewart, where can people find you on social media, and who is the most racist president in your opinion, in that order?
Yeah, you can find me at Artful Stew. That's AR or whatever, Artful Stew. You know how to spell.
People know how to spell. We'll throw it up on the video.
Well, it is Twitter. And the most racist president, ooh, that's a really tough call. I would say, I think the ones who own the slaves, I'm going to say one who owns enslaved people would be the most racist ones. Close second, Andrew Johnson. Close third, Woodrow Wilson. Makes sense.
Madiba Dennie, where can folks find you on the internet, and who was the most racist president?
Folks can find me on Twitter at Audrey Lauder Mercy, AudreyLawda Mercy. And for who was the most racist president? Okay, it's a challenge. But I think my gut leans Andrew Jackson, because just I could never get past the Trail of Tears in school back in the day. I remember learning about him, being like, that guy. So yeah, I think that's who I would pick.
It's a good pick. I mean, it's a terrible person, but a good pick for the list.
Right.
And Robert George, where can folks find you on Twitter, and who's the most racist president?
So you can find me at Rob George. Come for the political analysis and stay for the puns, or come for the puns and to heck with the political analysis. You can also you should also follow Be Opinion, which is the official Twitter. The official Twitter follow of Bloomberg Opinion, because you might see a column or two of mine this coming week. So you can find that there.
Exciting.
I'm going to give I'm going to give like 10 of the first 12 presidents, I believe, were slave owners. But they were creatures of their time, so I'm going to give them a pass. And then I also think that
Abolitionists were in that time too, Robert.
yeah, well, true. But we did fight a civil war to try and have some kind of a assessment of what the country is supposed to look like vis-a-vis black versus white. So I would tend to look at the presidents after the Civil War in a different light than I would the ones before. In that light, I'm going to say I'm definitely going to put Woodrow Wilson at the top, because after the Civil War and after you had a couple of presidents a few presidents who tried to move the ball a little bit on race, he comes in and resegregates Washington, resegregates the White House. He premieres Birth of a Nation, arguably the most brilliantly, technically brilliant
We know.
movie, but the most racist, quote, big budget picture in history. So Woodrow Wilson, is way up there.
Yes, 10 of the first 12 owned slaves. A lot more probably would have owned slaves if they could have, including the current one. But what the hell? I'm going to give it to John Tyler, because he served in the Confederate legislature after the Civil War, even though he had been a president. And with that is a show. I'm Tom Brennan. You can find me online at Brennanator. Thank you again very much, panel. And a quick round of thanks to Declan Shalvey and Jordy Belair for creating the Electoral Dysfunction Eagle art. Thank you to Kevin Scott for creating our show animation, to Joanne Harris for creating our show theme song, and to Ned Thorne for helping me put these together every single week. And with that, we're going to kick things over to the great state of Colorado, where our old pal Darcy Burke and the Burke Family Band will play us out this week. Ned Thorne, star wipe me to Colorado.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching Electoral Dysfunction. We are the musical guests. My name is Darcy Burke. This is my father, Michael Burke, and we're going to do a couple songs for you. We're starting out with a song by Mark Graham, who is your go-to choice for blasphemy and sass. And the song of his we're doing is called No Democracy in Heaven. Please enjoy.
No democracy in heaven. I know it's sad but true. God makes the rules and tells us what we can and cannot do. When you die and go to glory, for you he'll know what's best. Slug slop and eat your angel food. Give your brain a rest. No democracy in heaven. No democracy in hell. The devil is your master and he knows his job full well. You were sent to burn and suffer, for you're a dirty rat, and there is no referendum that can change all that. No democracy in heaven, no democracy in hell. But some say in the USA it is alive and well. Your opinions will not matter when your earthly races run. So vote or write a letter to your congressman. No democracy in heaven. I know it's sad but true. God makes the rules and tells us what we can and cannot do. When you die and go to glory, for you he'll know what's best. So shut up and eat your angel food. Give your brain a rest. going to do a song that is all about banks. And I think that is very appropriate. Written by Les Rice, an apple farmer in New York State. He wrote it about 1948. It's called The Banks Are Made of Marble. I traveled round this country from shore to shining shore. It really made me wonder the things I heard and saw. I saw the weary farmer plowing side and low. I heard the auction hammer just a-knocking down his hoe. But the banks are made of marble with a guard at every door. And the vaults are stuffed with silver that the farmer sweated for. I saw the weary seamen standing idly by the shore. I heard the bosses saying, got no work for you no more. But the banks are made of marble with a guard at every door. And the vaults were stuffed with silver that the seamen sweated for. I saw a weary miner scrubbing coal dust from his back. I heard his children crying, got no coal to heat the shack. But the banks are made of marble with a guard at every door. And the vaults are stuffed with silver that the miners sweated for. I saw my brothers working throughout this mighty land. I prayed we get together and together make a stand. Then we'll own those banks of marble with a guard at every door. And we'd share the spots of silver that we had sweated for. I hope you enjoyed that.
Seize the means of production.